I didn't know it was English when I first heard it. I was 5, maybe 6. The television blared in a room that smelled of tea and rain-soaked laundry. A cartoon character shouted, "Hello?" And I repeated it, mouth full of biscuit crumbs. "Hello," I whispered, testing the weight of the word on my tongue. It felt light, almost slippery, like trying to catch a bubble before it popped. My mother turned toward me and smiled. "Say it again," she encouraged. "Hello," I said louder. She clapped, and just like that, the word stuck. It was the first word in a language that would eventually become my bridge to the world. But that day, it was just a fun sound, bright and strange and exciting. I didn't know I was beginning a journey. I didn't know that a simple greeting would one day lead me to heartbreak, triumph, and transformation. But every journey starts with a step. Mine started with hello. The English alphabet looked like a secret code at first. 26 letters. Curved ones, pointy ones, letters that looked like twins. I remember sitting at a small desk with a pencil that felt too big in my hand, trying to copy each letter on lined paper. B, B, C, C. The song was cheerful, almost too cheerful for how frustrated I felt. My teacher sang it like it was a nursery rhyme. I sang it like a robot malfunctioning. Back in my language, the letters made sense. They fit in my mouth like old shoes, worn in and comfortable. But English letters, they were tourists in my brain, wandering around without a guide. G and J were especially tricky. And th? What was that? I had never put my tongue between my teeth to make a sound before. I practiced in front of the mirror, looking like a baby blowing raspberries. Still, there was something magical about those letters, like learning to play an instrument. Once I could put them together, CATDOGRUN, it was like unlocking a door to a house I didn't know I lived in. I remember the first time I read a full sentence out loud in class. It was from a little book with a yellow cover. "The sun is big." Everyone clapped. I flushed with pride like I had written the sentence myself. The letters weren't just shapes anymore, they were stepping stones. Every night after that, I practiced writing the alphabet over and over. I wanted to tame it, to make it mine. I didn't know it then, but those nights were the foundation, the quiet beginning of something life-changing. English didn't feel like mine yet, but I was beginning to understand it was something I could reach for, and I would keep reaching. Her name was Mrs. Alvarez. She wore colorful scarves and smelled like cinnamon and old books. She spoke English like she had invented it. Every word rolled off her tongue with purpose, with rhythm, like she was playing music that the rest of us were just learning how to hear. She was my English teacher. But to me, she was more than that. She was a walking, talking dictionary with a heartbeat. She had a habit of writing words on the board with a little smile in the corner of her mouth, as if the word was a gift she was unwrapping for us. Today's word is curious. She said it slowly, clearly, like she was teaching a bird how to talk. CURIOUS. Then she'd act it out, leaning forward, pretending to peer into something unseen. "Curious," she'd say again, her eyes wide, like when you want to know more. She didn't just teach us what words meant. She taught us how they felt. When I made mistakes, she never laughed. She never rolled her eyes. Instead, she would smile and say, "Good try. Let's fix it together." It was the together that made the difference. I once asked her what confidence meant. She didn't give me the dictionary answer. She pointed at me and said, "It means raising your hand even when you're not sure." That day, I raised my hand. I got the answer wrong, but she clapped anyway. After class, she handed me a small notebook. "Write every new word you learn in here," she said. "Make it yours." I did. I filled that notebook with strange, beautiful words. Some spelled wrong, some used in the wrong way. But every single one was a step. When I was scared of speaking, I thought of her voice in my head saying, "Mistakes mean you're trying." She believed in me before I believed in myself. And in the quiet corners of my heart, even now, I still hear her voice when I get stuck. Soft, steady, and full of cinnamon. Let's fix it together. Learning English made me brave. Or maybe it just made me used to being wrong. I made mistakes constantly. Not the kind that you could brush off with a smile, the kind that made your cheeks burn and your stomach twist, the kind you remember years later and still cringe. Like the day I tried to tell my classmate I was bored during lunch. "I'm boring," I said, slumping dramatically in my chair. He looked confused for a second. Then he grinned and said, "Yeah, a little." It wasn't until much later that I realized what I had actually said. Bored is a feeling. Boring is what other people feel because of you. That one letter turned me from a quiet kid into a self-declared snooze fest. There were other slip-ups too. Like when I proudly told my teacher, I cooked my homework. I meant I cooked after doing my homework. She blinked, then laughed so hard she had to wipe her glasses. But not every mistake was funny. Sometimes I said nothing at all, afraid I'd mess up in front of people. I remember standing in line at a bakery, repeating a sentence in my head over and over. "Can I have a chocolate muffin, please?" When it was finally my turn, I panicked and just pointed. Some people were kind, some were not. There were classmates who giggled when I mispronounced beach. There were strangers who spoke slower, louder, as if I was hard of hearing instead of just learning. There were days I wanted to quit. Just stop speaking altogether. It felt like I was walking through fog with people watching me trip. But then, one day, I made a mistake and laughed. Out loud. With everyone else. I had called a kitchen counter a kitchen mountain. And instead of wanting to disappear, I laughed at the image of a mountain in the middle of a kitchen. That was the moment something shifted. I realized that mistakes didn't mean I was stupid. They meant I was growing. They meant I was brave enough to try. Every misunderstanding was a battle scar, and I was earning my fluency one embarrassment at a time. By the end of that year, I didn't just speak more English. I forgave myself more too. Because you can't learn a language without failing a little. Or a lot. But you keep going anyway. English used to stay outside. It belonged to classrooms, TV shows, and signs on the street. It didn't belong in our kitchen, where the air smelled like cumin and garlic, and our native tongue rolled out naturally like the steam from my mother's pots. But slowly, it started to slip in. It began with small things, me using sorry instead of our word for it. My little brother shouting yes during a game. My dad, who barely spoke English, practicing phrases under his breath while slicing tomatoes. English became our strange dinner guest, uninvited but always showing up. At first, my parents didn't like it. They'd gently correct me when I said table instead of mesa, water instead of agua. My mother would shake her head with a little smile and say, "Don't forget who you are." I didn't want to forget. But I didn't want to fall behind either. Sometimes, dinner felt like a tug of war between two languages. We'd mix both until our conversations were a patchwork of sounds. "Pass me the pan, not that one. The grande one. Yeah, Isa." It was chaotic. It was messy. It was ours. My father started calling our mix of languages kitchen English. Not perfect, not polished, but functional, full of flavor, and uniquely ours. It wasn't about grammar. It was about understanding, about trying, about keeping up with the world outside our door while holding on to what was inside. And there was beauty in that. My mom eventually started watching English cooking shows, mimicking recipes while mispronouncing oregano with confidence. My brother would recite random lines from cartoons at the table. And me? I started translating jokes between languages, discovering which ones survived the trip and which ones didn't. English at the dinner table was never just about language. It was about identity, about family, about change. We didn't stop speaking our first language. We just made room for another. We set a place for English, not as a replacement, but as a guest who became family. I used to walk through school like a shadow. The hallways were alive with sound, laughter, gossip, sneakers squeaking on tile. Everyone seemed to know where to go, what to say, how to say it. And then there was me, moving quietly, hoping no one would notice the silence wrapped around me like a scarf. It wasn't that I didn't know English. It was that I didn't trust it yet. I had the words. I had practiced them in notebooks, whispered them into pillows at night. But saying them out loud, in front of real people, that felt different, dangerous even. So I kept quiet. In class, I nodded instead of answering. I smiled instead of greeting. In the cafeteria, I sat with people who spoke my first language, even if we had nothing else in common. It was safer that way. Less risky, less chance of being laughed at. I watched others speak freely, their voices soaring through conversations like birds in flight. I wanted that. I wanted to jump into the air with them. But every time I opened my mouth, I felt the weight of every mispronounced word I'd ever said. One day a teacher pulled me aside after class. "You're quiet," she said gently. "But I know there's a lot happening in here." She tapped her finger to her temple. "Don't be afraid to share it." I nodded. I didn't believe her. Not yet. But I remembered it. Instead of talking, I became a listener. I memorized the way people used slang. I studied how they laughed mid-sentence, how they cut each other off without being rude. I started to understand the rhythm of conversation, the invisible dance of it. And slowly, my silence began to shift. I started answering questions in class, just short ones, with yes or no. I said hi to the girl who sat next to me in math. I started humming English songs under my breath, letting the words loosen something inside me. I wasn't silent because I had nothing to say. I was silent because I was learning to say it the right way. And I was building the courage to be heard, not just understood. Eventually, the hallway didn't feel so loud anymore. Eventually, I found my voice. Her name was Jessica. She had a high ponytail, a laugh that could echo through 3 hallways, and a backpack covered in stickers. She was the kind of person who made friends by accident, loud, warm, and always talking, like her words were in a race to reach the world. And somehow, she found me. We sat next to each other in science class. She caught me drawing in the corner of my notebook once. Just a little doodle of a dog with sunglasses. And she laughed. "You're funny," she said. I blinked. "Funny?" She pointed at the dog. "He looks like he listens to bad music." I smiled, nervous, confused, but also something else. Seen. I don't know how it happened, really. One day she asked if I wanted to sit with her at lunch, and I said yes before I could overthink it. She talked a mile a minute. I said maybe 5 words the entire time. But she didn't care. She just kept going, filling the silences I couldn't quite carry. And then one day, She said something that stuck. "You don't talk much, but when you do, it's smart. I like that." That was the beginning. With Jessica, English wasn't a wall anymore. It was a bridge. A little shaky, a little uneven. But it connected us. She didn't correct me when I messed up. She didn't slow down for me. She let me catch up in my own way. She made me brave. I started asking questions, making jokes, speaking even when I didn't have the perfect words. She didn't laugh when I called the microwave a hot TV. She just said, "That's actually a better name, honestly." We watched movies together, her pausing every few scenes to explain slang or weird expressions. I helped her with Spanish homework. We traded music and inside jokes. She taught me what cringe meant. I taught her how to roll her R's. Friendship has a language of its own. Sometimes it's laughter. Sometimes it's just sitting next to someone and not feeling small. Jessica gave me space to speak. And more than that, she listened. It happened without warning. I was walking home, headphones in, replaying a math problem in my head. Something about dividing fractions. I was trying to remember the steps, muttering them under my breath. Flip the second one. Multiply across. And then it hit me. I was thinking in English. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Cars passed. Leaves blew past my feet. The world kept moving like nothing had changed. But I had. And it terrified me. It felt like betrayal. For so long, English had been something I reached for. Something outside of me. Separate. And now it was inside. Rewiring my thoughts, sneaking into the quiet spaces of my mind. I felt like I had let my first language down, like it was sitting in the corner of my brain. Forgotten. I went home that day and tried to think in my native tongue on purpose. I forced myself to describe things the way I used to. The color of the sky, the taste of dinner, the way my mother looked when she was tired. But it felt slower. Not because my first language was weaker, but because it didn't match the new rhythm I had grown into. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat with the strange ache of change. Later that week, I mentioned it to Jessica. "I think in English now," I said, quiet and unsure. She just smiled. "That's how you know you're fluent." But it didn't feel like fluency. It felt like loss. Until I realized something important. I wasn't replacing one language with another. I was expanding. Now, I could switch. I could translate, interpret, switch codes mid-sentence without even thinking. I could explain myself in more than one way. My world wasn't divided. It had doubled. And maybe, just maybe, thinking in English didn't mean I was losing myself. It meant I was learning how to carry more than one version of me. Side by side, it started with an assignment. "Write about yourself," the teacher said. 1 page. In English, I stared at the blank sheet of paper for a long time. My pencil hovered over the lines, and my mind raced. Not with what to say, but how to say it. I knew my story. I just wasn't sure I could tell it in this borrowed language. I had always loved writing. In my native tongue, my words flowed. They curled and danced on the page like they belonged there. But English? English was a new instrument, and my fingers still fumbled over the strings. Still, I tried. I wrote about moving, about my first day of school, about how the alphabet used to scare me and how now it felt like an old friend. I wrote about the time I called a blanket a body napkin and how nobody let me forget it. I wrote about my parents, my little brother, my kitchen filled with spices and mixed up languages. I wrote like no one was going to read it. And when I finished, something felt different. The English wasn't perfect. I knew that. The grammar had holes. Some sentences stumbled. But it was me, raw, honest, and real. I handed it in and braced for red marks and corrections. Instead, my teacher wrote one sentence at the top. "This is beautiful. Thank you for sharing your voice." That was the first time I believed I had one. From then on, I kept writing. Little stories, journal entries, poems I never showed anyone. I started to love the challenge of expression in English, how it made me stretch, search for new words, new shapes to fit my feelings into. Writing gave me power. It gave me control over a language that used to control me. And maybe most importantly, it helped me see that my voice didn't belong to one language or the other. It belonged to me. Now, when I write, I mix things. I borrow metaphors from home and stitch them into English lines. I make grammar bend to emotion. I don't always follow the rules, and sometimes that's the point. Because this isn't just about English anymore. It's about telling my story in whatever language it needs to be told. The first time it happened, I didn't even realize it. I woke up on a Tuesday, the sunlight slipping through the blinds in stripes across my pillow. I stretched, blinked a few times, and remembered the dream. I was at a train station, asking someone for directions. "Which way to platform 6?" I had asked. Clear, calm, no hesitation. It wasn't until I was brushing my teeth that it hit me. I had spoken English in the dream, not broken English, not subtitles, not a mix of half-translated words like I usually used in dreams. Just fluent, flowing English, like it belonged there, like it belonged to me. I sat down on the edge of my bed and smiled to myself. No teacher had told me the moment would come. No textbook warned me. No app had a badge for "Congratulations, you've unlocked dreaming." But somehow, it felt like the truest sign yet. Dreams are where your brain doesn't try to impress anyone. It doesn't worry about mistakes or judgment, it just is. And now, English was part of that is. At first, it only happened occasionally. A sentence here, a phrase there. Then entire conversations. Arguments, jokes. Sometimes I dreamed of places I'd never been, cities where everyone spoke English and I fit in without even trying. The dreams weren't always exciting, but they were always clear. And they made something very real to me. I was no longer just learning English. I was living it, even when I slept. It didn't mean I'd forgotten my first language, not at all. I still dreamed in that too, especially when I missed home or thought about family. But now there was room for both. My mind had made space. English, once a foreign object, had become part of the landscape. A second skin, a voice in the background of my subconscious, narrating scenes while I rested. I don't know exactly when English stopped being something I carried and started being something that carried me. But somewhere between memory and imagination, it had taken root. And I was finally dreaming in a language I used to fear. I used to think of English as a place I was trying to get to. It felt like a country with high walls and fast roads. And I was walking, barefoot, behind everyone else, clutching a map I couldn't quite read. I thought one day I'd arrive, plant a flag, and someone would say, "Congratulations, you speak English now." But that moment never came, not like that. What did come were moments, small, quiet ones, that told me something had changed. Ordering food without panicking, laughing at a joke in real time, reading a book without translating every word, comforting someone, being understood. And then the bigger ones. Getting a job interview, writing an essay that made someone cry, telling someone how I really felt, and not needing to rephrase it twice. Now, I don't think of English as a destination. It's a house I built, room by room, word by word. Some walls are crooked. The furniture is mismatched. There are cracks in the floor where older languages still shine through. But it's mine. And I live in it fully. I don't speak English perfectly. Some people might hear my accent and make assumptions. Some might correct me when I don't ask them to. That used to sting. Now I let it go. Because this language isn't something I borrowed. It's something I earned. With every mistake, every late-night study session, every silent hallway, and every brave little sentence I spoke when I was terrified. English didn't erase who I am. It added to it. Now I switch between languages without thinking. I carry memories in one, dreams in another. I write in English. I pray in my first language. I love in both. I'm not from just one place anymore. I'm from the language I live in. And somehow, it speaks me back.